Tonight, we're going deep, deeper than you can probably imagine. We're investigating one of the most profound and, frankly, one of the most terrifying mysteries to ever come out of our planet's oceans. It's a story that starts with a single, inexplicable sound recorded in the most remote corner of the world, a sound that, for years, hinted at something truly colossal living in the eternal dark. But before we even get to the sound itself, I want you to just take a moment and picture it, the deep ocean. It's not just water down there. It is a completely alien world. A world defined by three constants: absolute, impenetrable darkness, a bone-crushing pressure that would instantly turn a human being to pulp, and a bitter, near-freezing cold. It's an environment so hostile, so utterly different from our own, that just thinking about it can tap into a very primal fear.
You know there's actually a name for this feeling: thalassophobia. It's not just being scared of water. It's that deep, unsettling fear of the vast, empty, and completely unknown deep. It's that chill that runs up your spine when you're swimming and you can't see the bottom, that nagging thought of what could be swimming just below your feet, totally unseen. And when you really look at the facts, you realize that fear isn't irrational at all.
Because here's the kicker: 95%. A staggering 95% of our own planet's oceans are completely, totally unexplored. We have mapped the surface of the moon and even Mars in more detail than our own ocean floor. It is the last great wilderness on Earth, a place where, for all we know, monsters could be very, very real. And back in 1997, we think we might have heard one. So, how in the world did we hear it? Well, the story doesn't begin in a science lab with people in white coats. No, it begins in the deep paranoia and the constant, simmering tension of the Cold War. The very tool that captured this incredible mystery wasn't built to explore our world. It was built to spy on our enemies. So picture this. It's the 1960s. The U.S. Navy secretly starts laying this massive network of hydrophones. Think of them as giant underwater microphones, all across the ocean floor. It was called SOSUS, the Sound Surveillance System. Its mission was simple and also terrifying. Listen for the faint hum of Soviet nuclear submarines trying to sneak up on the American coastline. These things were so unbelievably sensitive, they could pick out the unique sound of a specific submarine from thousands of kilometers away. Well, the Cold War ends, and this top-secret military network gets handed over to scientists at NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Their job was to listen for things like underwater volcanoes and whale songs. And then, in the summer of 1997, they heard something else, something they were not prepared for. The operators listening in that day, they heard a sound that didn't just register on their equipment. It was a physical assault on their senses. It was so loud, so powerful, and so completely out of nowhere that they literally recoiled, ripping the headphones right off their ears. The profound silence of the deep Pacific had just been shattered by a deafening roar from a totally unknown source. So what did they hear? What was this sound? Well, once the shock wore off, the real investigation began. And the scientists, they treated it like a crime scene, breaking down every single piece of acoustic evidence. And the more they analyzed the sound, which they nicknamed the Bloop, the more impossible it all seemed. The sheer scale of this thing was just mind-boggling. They pinpointed its origin to one of the most remote places on Earth, this desolate stretch of the southern Pacific Ocean. The sound itself was this ultra-low frequency bloop that rose and then fell over about a minute. But here's the detail that changes everything. It was so loud it was detected by multiple SOS sensors spread out over a range of more than 5,000 kilometers. That is over 3,000 miles. A sound from one spot was heard clearly across a quarter of the entire Pacific Ocean. Let's try to put that into perspective, okay? The call of a blue whale, which is the loudest sound made by any known living creature on this planet, can travel about 1,500 kilometers. Pretty impressive. The sound of a nuclear submarine, the very thing this system was built to hear, is only detectable from less than 500 kilometers away. The bloop was heard over a distance at least 3 times farther than the loudest animal on Earth. Whatever made this sound, it had to be impossibly, monumentally powerful. And this is where our story takes a sharp turn from a scientific anomaly into something that feels like it's straight out of a horror film. Because when the scientists analyzed the acoustic signature of the sound, they couldn't rule out the most sensational and, frankly, the most terrifying possibility of all, that this impossible sound was biological. The lead scientist on the project, Dr. Christopher Fox of NOAA, was actually the first to say it out loud. He noted that the way the frequency rose and fell, its texture, it didn't sound like a machine. It didn't sound like a volcano or an earthquake. It sounded organic. It sounded for all the world like the call of an animal. Just an animal far, far larger and way more powerful than anything we ever imagined could exist. So let's really try to wrap our heads around this. A blue whale, the largest animal that has ever lived on this planet, tops out at around 30 meters, or about 100 feet long. It is a true giant. But for a living creature to produce a sound as powerful as the bloop, the science suggested it would need to be, well, bigger, a lot bigger. We're talking about an animal conservatively estimated to be between 75 and 100 meters long. That is nearly the length of a football field, a living creature almost one-third the size of the Eiffel Tower, a true leviathan. And just when the idea of a real-life, city-block-sized sea monster couldn't get any more unsettling, internet sleuths discovered a coincidence. A detail so bizarre, so chilling, it took this mystery out of the realm of pure science and into something much, much stranger. And it all goes back to a horror writer from the 1920s. Back in 1928, the famous horror writer H.P. Lovecraft wrote The Call of Cthulhu. In that story, he describes this massive, ancient, tentacled monster god sleeping in a sunken city he called Rylea. And he actually gave precise coordinates for this fictional city. Well, it turns out the coordinates for the real-world origin of the bloop, recorded 69 years later, are shockingly, unnervingly close to that exact same spot in the remote Pacific. So what do you do with that? I mean, how do we explain this? Was Lovecraft just making a really, really lucky guess about where the most remote, desolate point in the ocean was? Or was there something else going on? The proximity of this very real scientific mystery to the fictional lair of a colossal sea monster was a coincidence just a little too perfect for a lot of people to ignore. For years, the mystery just hung in the air. The giant sea monster theory was just too fantastic for most scientists to really accept, but no other explanation seemed to fit the data. Finally, after years of studying polar acoustics, NOAA put forward an official and much more mundane explanation for the impossible sound. They called it an icequake. The theory goes that the bloop was simply the sound of a massive iceberg calving or cracking apart off the coast of Antarctica. As these colossal pieces of ice break and grind against each other, they can generate incredibly powerful, low-frequency sound waves that can, in fact, travel across entire oceans. So, a natural, non-biological source for a very strange sound. Case closed, right? Well, not exactly. Because a lot of people, including some researchers, found this explanation unsatisfying. You see, when you listen to the recording of a confirmed icequake, it sounds chaotic. It's the sound of grinding, fracturing, breaking. It's mechanical, like rocks smashing together. The bloop, on the other hand, had a very distinct profile. It was more rhythmic. It had a clear rise and a clear fall in frequency. It had that signature that Dr. Fox himself first described as organic. It sounded less like ice breaking and more like something calling out. And so, that's where we're left. Science offers us a rational, plausible explanation, shifting ice. But the mystery, the doubt, it lingers. The sound profile doesn't perfectly match. That eerie Lovecraft connection is still there. And the fact remains that in the summer of 1997, something in the deepest part of our world made a noise louder than any animal we've ever known. And as we sit here today, 95% of that world remains in total, absolute darkness. So you have to ask yourself, is it really just the sound of ice? Or was something waking up in the deep?